Hey guys, tonight we're going to the rainy, muddy streets of 18th century London, where the smell of horse manure blends with roasted chestnuts, and everything feels just a little damp, even your soul. But among the fishmongers, chimney sweeps and street criers, there's something wildly out of place. It's golden, spiky, balanced like a crown on a silk-covered pedestal in a market stall, guarded like it's the crown jewels. And you're not hallucinating from coal fumes. You're staring at a pineapple, one fruit, and yes, it's drawing an actual crowd. You probably won't survive this era's version of Whole Foods pricing, because that one pineapple, it costs the equivalent of thousands of dollars today, all while you're walking around in a wool coat that hasn't been washed since last autumn. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe. But only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Drop your location and local time in the comments. I love seeing where you're tuning in from. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You inch closer to the stall, elbowing past a rather large man whose powdered wig is currently hosting two pigeons. Everyone's murmuring admiration. No one is reaching for the fruit. Because that pineapple isn't for sale, not really. It's here to be seen, admired, gossiped about, perhaps even rented for the weekend. But eaten? Oh no, that would be scandalously wasteful. You might be wondering, how did this spiny tropical fruit, native to South America, end up as the toast of Georgian England? That's what we're here for. Right now, someone's whispering that the pineapple came from a ship docked in the Thames just 2 days ago. Another claims it was grown locally in a heated greenhouse, what they called a pinery. Both might be wrong, but accuracy isn't the point. The point is prestige. You lean in. The stall owner winks at you and says you can touch it for a penny. You back away. You've seen pineapples before, but not like this. This one practically glows in the fog, as if it knows it's more valuable than most people here. Historians still argue whether the obsession began with royalty or with Britain's growing empire, but either way, it spread fast. By the mid-1700s, pineapples were everywhere. Everywhere rich people were, anyway. They weren't common. That was the whole appeal. They were, quite literally, uncommonly common in elite settings, like a diamond or a duchess, or those absurdly tall powdered wigs that seem to defy both gravity and taste. But don't let the glam fool you. Behind every glamorous pineapple in London, there's a voyage. A soggy, months-long, mould-prone journey across the Atlantic from Caribbean colonies like Jamaica and Barbados. Many of the fruits never made it, spoiled at sea, rotted in crates, or simply got squashed by a careless crate packer with a limp and poor judgment. Still, they tried, because nothing said I am better than you quite like a pineapple perched on your sideboard. You overhear a woman with gloves made of real lace whisper. I heard Lord Pembroke paid 15 guineas for one last week. That's several months' wages for a skilled tradesman. Or, a whole house in parts of Yorkshire. A pineapple in this century isn't just a fruit. It's a statement, a power move, a centerpiece, and most often it's not even sliced. It's just placed on the table at a dinner party like a small sun-kissed deity. The sheer absurdity makes you smirk, but you get it. This isn't really about the pineapple. It's about the illusion of empire, about having control over something wildly exotic, out of reach for most, and fragile. And it's about making sure all your guests see that control. There's a bit of a scandal unfolding now. A nobleman's servant apparently tried to sneak a bite of the fruit last night while polishing it. It's said the servant was promptly dismissed, not because of the theft, well, not only, but because he left teeth marks. Amateur. You spot a boy carrying a painted sign advertising pineapple sighting, 3p, heated tent. The idea that people might pay to look at a pineapple for a few minutes in a hot tent seems absurd. But again, this is 18th century England, where wallpaper can bankrupt a duke and powdered wigs are taller than the family dog. Oh, and here comes a painter, easel and all, brushing out an outline of the market scene. Of course, he'll exaggerate the pineapple's sheen. Maybe add a few sunbeams, it's what sells. One fact sticks with you as you slowly walk away. The very first successful pineapple grown in England, under glass with coal-fueled heating and extreme fuss, was grown in the 1670s at Dorney Court by John Rose, gardener to King Charles II. In celebration, Rose actually presented it to the king in a formal ceremony. Yes, a fruit, presented like a military honour. And you know what? King Charles held it like a chalice in his royal portrait. You can still find that painting today. Pineapple in hand, lips curled slightly, possibly thinking, this took more effort than a treaty with France. So now, as you fade into the crowd and the fog thickens, you begin to understand. This spiky golden fruit isn't just a snack. It's a performance, a ritual, a delusion perhaps, but one they're all desperate to buy into. And so are you, just a little. You follow the ripple of whispers through the crowd until it leads you to the back entrance of a private home, a townhouse on a posh London street where the curtains are always drawn and the chimney always smokes. Through a sliver in the door, you glimpse a butler carrying something like it's made of crystal. But it's not crystal, it's a pineapple. Again. Upstairs, in a candlelit dining room, thick with the scent of rosewater and mutton, you see the fruit placed reverently in the centre of a long linen-covered table. It doesn't get sliced. It doesn't even get passed around. It simply sits there, gleaming, while the guests dine on everything but pineapple. You watch as powdered aristocrats lean toward it with expressions more suited to ancient relics than food. One woman fans herself and whispers, "It's almost vulgar how perfect it is." She's wearing 3 petticoats and a hat large enough to provide shade for an entire village. Her companion murmurs, "I saw one at Lady Grantham's that was larger but less fragrant. You're not at a dinner party, you're at a fruit pageant. Why were pineapples considered royalty? Let's start with the taste. Sweet, sharp, and wildly different from anything local. But most guests never tasted them. The real appeal was their origin. They came from far, far away, from tropical colonies soaked in sun and sweat. And in the British imagination, the pineapple was proof that their empire could touch the ends of the earth and then serve it chilled. Historians still debate whether this obsession came from genuine admiration for the fruit's flavour, or if it was more about projecting colonial power and wealth. Probably both. Either way, by the 18th century the pineapple had become the ultimate edible metaphor. Imagine if diamonds were soft and mouldy, and you had to refrigerate them constantly. That's basically what they were dealing with. You lean back and picture how absurd it would be today if people decorated their tables with, say, fresh avocados in lucite boxes, never to be opened. Oh wait, we do that. At weddings. The pineapple's symbolism got a boost from its appearance too. That crown of green, the textured gold skin. It looked regal, sculpted. And let's not forget, pineapples were fragile. They bruised easily, spoiled quickly, and had to be handled with more care than a French ambassador's ego. So if you could get one fresh and intact, that meant you had money, connections, and a good greenhouse. Or a really fast ship. You step into another salon, this one filled with paintings. You notice something odd. Pineapples lurking in oil portraits. A gentleman holding one like a globe. A lady offering it to the viewer like she's proposing a truce. These portraits weren't just commemorating a moment. They were showcasing a lifestyle. And the pineapple was front and centre. You try to imagine what today's version would be. Maybe holding a Tesla key fob in a professional headshot. A drone hovering beside your wedding photo. It doesn't quite match the strange elegance of a fruit that had to be shipped across oceans just to sit still. Now, let's talk etiquette. You didn't just serve pineapple to your guests, goodness no. You unveiled it. Preferably at the end of the meal when everyone was lulled into a food coma. The host would remove a silk cloth with a dramatic flair, revealing the fruit beneath like a magician revealing a rabbit. Guests would gasp, some might applaud, one might faint. You watch as a footman carries the pineapple away after the guests have admired it, not to the kitchen, but to a locked pantry. It'll be used again next week at another party, maybe even rented out if no one notices the slight soft spot forming on one side. One fringe report from the era claims that a certain viscount rented a pineapple for 6 weeks straight, each time parading it at dinner parties, never allowing it to be eaten. When it finally rotted, he had it replaced with a painted wooden replica. No one noticed. Some of this might sound like satire, but these people were serious. They debated pineapple etiquette in newspapers. They documented pineapple events in letters. They commissioned pineapple embroideries. The fruit became so culturally embedded that you'd find its image on dinnerware, wallpaper, garden gates, even gravestones. One historian joked, the pineapple was not a fruit, it was a career. And truly, some people based entire reputations on their ability to source, grow, or simply display one. Imagine applying for a job today and putting under special skills, maintains access to at least one pineapple per season. You smile at the thought as you step back out into the fog. The fruit still gleams behind you, alone on the table, a golden reminder that sometimes people will value the rare over the reasonable, and that the height of sophistication might just be not eating the thing you paid a small fortune to acquire. You wake up the next morning in a sun-soaked harbour town, not in England this time, but somewhere much warmer, somewhere where the air smells like sugarcane, salt, and a little bit of sweat. Welcome to the Caribbean, the real birthplace of Britain's pineapple obsession. It's loud here. Not with gossip or fanfare, but with labour. You hear machetes slicing through underbrush, wooden carts creaking under their weight, and the low hum of people working from before dawn until long after the sun begins to droop. You're standing on a plantation, ankle-deep in dry red soil, watching workers tend to rows of prickly green plants that sprawl across a hill. The sun bakes the ground until it cracks. No corsets here, no powdered wigs, just bodies bent over, harvesting fruit destined for another continent where people will never know their names or care how the pineapples got there. You learn quickly that the Caribbean climate is perfect for pineapples and sugarcane and coffee and, yes, slavery. These plantations weren't just farms, they were engines of empire powered by forced labour. Indigenous people were decimated early on. Then came enslaved Africans, shipped by the thousands, working in brutal conditions. Pineapples, you realise, might have been a symbol of British refinement, but their roots were soaked in heat, exhaustion and pain. Historians still argue whether pineapples were ever a significant export in terms of volume. Sugar was far more lucrative, but there's no debate that they became a symbol of colonial reach. Growing pineapples wasn't just farming, it was performance. If Britain could bring these exotic fruits to its breakfast tables, it proved that the empire had no boundaries. A spiky middle finger to nature, geography and humility. You follow a wooden cart down to the dock where the pineapples are packed in straw and wood for the voyage. There's a frantic energy here, like the fruit might spoil if you so much as look at it too long. And often it did. Pineapples had to be picked before they were fully ripe, meaning they arrived in England underripe or half-rotted, depending on the ship's luck. Yet still, they were loaded by the barrelful. Captains were paid bonuses for arriving with intact fruit. In some cases, passengers were forbidden from even breathing near the pineapples. They had their own corners in the hold, guarded more fiercely than the rum. Probably rightly so. One little-known story tells of a Scottish merchant who insured a single crate of pineapples for the equivalent of £10,000 in today's money. It sank in a storm. Legend has it he never ate tropical fruit again out of spite. You walk along the pier now, past barrels of molasses and crates of coffee, and you wonder who got the better deal here. The colonies grew, picked, packed and shipped. Britain unwrapped and bragged. It's a bit like gifting someone a beautifully wrapped present, only to watch them admire the ribbon for 2 hours and never open the box. In town, A tavern advertises pineapple punch, which probably contains 0 pineapple but plenty of rum and citrus. Locals laugh at the idea of someone displaying the fruit instead of eating it. You hear someone mutter, "Only a Brit would buy food and not touch it." And there's a pineapple growing just outside the inn, in the sandy soil next to a goat who seems entirely unimpressed. You crouch down and touch its skin, warm, real, not sitting under candlelight or nestled in a lace doily. Here, the pineapple is food, refreshing, fibrous, sweet. It's served in slices, mixed into stews, or pressed into juice. It's not worshipped, it's consumed, as it should be. You pass a market stall where a woman is selling fruit by the basket, papayas, bananas, guavas, and pineapples. 3 for a shilling. That's a fraction of what one slice might cost at a London dinner party. And you realise something odd. For all their romanticising of the pineapple, very few English aristocrats actually tasted them. Most couldn't tell you what one really tasted like. Too valuable to eat, too symbolic to reduce to pulp. It's as if someone today bought a rare vintage of wine, had it framed, and never uncorked it. Not because they didn't want to, but because the idea of owning it was sweeter than the wine itself. You hear waves crash softly against the hull of a ship being loaded in the bay. The sun is beginning to sink, and the air smells of tar, sugar, and smoke. Tomorrow, that ship will head for England. On board, crates of pineapples, likely picked too early, wrapped in damp straw, jostled by every wave. One of them might survive the journey. It might end up in the window of a high-end grocer in Mayfair. It might be photographed, painted, and paraded. It might even be mistaken for the same one from last week's soiree. But tonight, it's just fruit. Grown in hard soil. Shipped across a salty, unforgiving sea, and desired by people who don't even remember what it's like to be hungry. You take one last look at the plantation rows as the lanterns are lit. There's beauty here, yes, but also sweat and stories lost in the shipping manifests, and somewhere deep in the foliage a pineapple waits for its strange journey to begin. You're back in London now, but not in the muddy street market this time. You're inside a home so grand that the doorknobs are gilded, the floorboards don't creak, and the wallpaper probably cost more than your monthly rent. Welcome to the drawing room of the upper crust, where your host is preparing for what may be the most anticipated event of the week, the unveiling of the pineapple. Tonight's dinner is less about the meal and more about the moment. You float through the room like a ghost, taking in the candlelight flickering off polished silver, the soft rustle of taffeta dresses, and the faint scent of oranges, beeswax, and ambition. Everywhere, guests whisper and peer at the centre of the table, which is conspicuously bare, save for a velvet cloth. You know what's under it. Everyone does. But saying it aloud would be gauche. Then comes the hush. The host, a man whose chin is at war with his waistcoat, rises slowly. With the drama of a stage magician, he whisks away the cloth to reveal the pineapple. Golden, immaculate, entirely uncut. The room exhales in delight. A smattering of applause. A woman fans herself theatrically. Historians still argue whether this pineapple parade was born from genuine awe or pure theatrical absurdity. It doesn't matter now, because here you are, watching grown adults emotionally moved by the presence of a fruit. No one touches it. Of course not. It is gazed upon, maybe rotated gently, and absolutely everyone leans in to have their photograph, well, painted likeness, taken beside it. One lady suggests it be weighed for posterity. You realise, with a sleepy smile, that this is basically Georgian Instagram. Instead of selfies with luxury cars, they took portraits with pineapples. The pineapple, in these circles, is a borrowed spotlight. Hosts who can't afford their own hire them for the evening. Some dinner parties even offer guests a pineapple viewing session scheduled between courses. Would you like to see the fruit before the syllabub, madam? Even more absurd are the rumours. That pineapple was gifted by the Prince of Wales. It once belonged to the Earl of Sandwich. It's been blessed by the Archbishop. All false, but you don't correct anyone. Why ruin the magic? There's a man near the window reciting poetry to the fruit. He's had 3 glasses of port and is comparing its skin to the armour of Achilles. His date is nodding, possibly asleep with her eyes open. At the far end of the room, you notice a servant standing stiffly. His job for the evening is to keep the pineapple from rolling off the silver pedestal. He looks like he's reconsidering his career. Let's pause to appreciate how much this all cost. Not just the fruit itself, but the shipping, the heating, required to grow it locally. We'll get to that in a bit. The artist commissioned to sketch it, the candles needed to light its golden glow, and the custom table linen, printed with little embroidered pineapples. It's a full sensory investment, and still, it is not eaten. Why? Because eating it would end the performance, like burning a priceless letter for warmth or popping a Fabergé egg into your omelette. To consume the pineapple is to acknowledge that it is just a fruit. The illusion crumbles. You wander toward the sideboard, where a bowl of actual food, things like cold beef, boiled peas and custard, is being politely ignored. The pineapple casts too strong a spell, but not all parties are quite so proper. You remember the story of Lady Lascelles, who once allowed a guest to touch the pineapple just once. The guest sobbed with gratitude. Another time, a duke attempted to casually slice a pineapple after supper, only to realise it was made of wood. His wife reportedly fainted. The pineapple's presence, oddly enough, made food seem more refined. Even if the chicken was dry and the pudding collapsed, the host could still gesture toward the pineapple as proof of good taste. Literally. Guests left with stories. "Did you see the one at Lord Berkeley's?" they'd say. "I swear it had a little crown on it." One fringe tidbit. Some people tried to perfume their homes with cut pineapple, not realising how fast it fermented. Picture a drawing room filled with the aroma of warm pineapple wine and regret. One man blamed it for a failed proposal. You step into the next room and find a guest sketching the pineapple from memory. "For my journal," he says. "It moved me." You look over his shoulder. It looks like a slightly confused hedgehog, but you nod politely. This obsession was more than social. It was spiritual. The pineapple came to represent warmth, hospitality, abundance. It crept into architecture, you'll see soon, into fashion, even into speech. Complimenting someone's dinner party by comparing it to a pineapple was a genuine thing. You stifle a yawn as the host begins a speech. Something about the noble virtues of cultivation, the marvel of science, the rewards of patience. All true. But really it's just a fancy way of saying, "Look what I have." You don't. You ease onto a velvet couch, let your eyelids droop slightly. The fruit still sits there, absorbing candlelight and compliments. No one dares cut it. The longer it remains whole, the more valuable the memory becomes. And as the fire crackles softly and the wine settles in your veins, you begin to understand. This isn't about the pineapple at all. It's about being seen beside one. You're walking now, not through a drawing room this time, but down a crooked cobblestone alley where a discreet sign swings above a storefront. It reads, "In fading gold leaf, pineapples to let." And no, your sleepy brain isn't misreading it, because in 18th century England, you don't need to own a pineapple to enjoy the social perks. You can simply rent one. Yes, that was a real thing. You peer inside the window. Behind glass, under a faintly tarnished dome, rests the star of the show. A perfectly decent, slightly overripe pineapple. It has likely been rented out multiple times already. But the shopkeeper knows how to rotate it, so the soft spot doesn't show. Inside, the air smells of wax polish, dry straw, and something sweet fermenting just a little too long. The pineapple is perched like a diver between rentals, waiting for its next public appearance. You read the rates: 1 guinea for a full evening display, half price for daytime luncheons, additional charge if handled, refundable deposit required in case of excessive admiration. The idea, of course, is that your guests never need to know it's rented. As long as you display it with confidence on a silver tray by candlelight, they'll assume it's yours. And that means status, connections, and pineapple-level prosperity. Historians still argue whether these pineapple rental shops were widespread or just a few quirky enterprises in big cities. But multiple surviving advertisements point to a real, if odd, practice. And frankly, it tracks. When luxury becomes too expensive to buy, people find creative ways to borrow it. You picture a modern equivalent: leasing designer handbags, renting Ferraris for an hour-long photo shoot, staging rented houseplants in your Zoom background. Really, nothing's changed, just the fruit. You watch as a gentleman in a wide-brimmed hat signs a ledger, accepts the pineapple with 2 gloved hands, and walks out like he's cradling the Holy Grail. The shopkeeper reminds him, return by morning, no nibbles. There's even a black market version of this trade. One story tells of a housemaid who borrowed her employer's prize pineapple to impress a suitor. She hosted a secret picnic, charged guests to see the fruit, and returned it before sunrise. No one noticed, or pretended not to. It's hard to overstate how much clout a pineapple could give you, even temporarily. A man could earn the admiration of peers. A woman could secure a more favourable marriage proposal. A merchant could fool investors into thinking he had connections in the West Indies. One fringe record even suggests pineapples were used in theatrical props, brought on stage during drawing room comedies as shorthand for wealth and taste. And yes, people clapped when they saw it. The absurdity makes you smile. But there's something rather sweet about it too. This idea that beauty, fleeting, fragrant, fragile, could be shared around like a story or a song, not hoarded, but cycled through the hands of those who needed a moment to shine. You sit down now in a dim tea house nearby, where a group of young poets is discussing pineapple metaphors. One compares the fruit to unrequited love, beautiful, painful to touch, never quite ripe when you need it. Another just wants to rhyme it with chapel. They're still working on that. You sip warm tea and eavesdrop as a woman claims she once attended 2 dinners in a single week where the same pineapple was displayed. She gasps dramatically. It hadn't aged a day, she says. Witchcraft, surely. Another woman pulls a folded handkerchief from her sleeve, embroidered with, you guessed it, a pineapple. It's tasteful, and definitely meant to be noticed. You peek out the tea house window as the pineapple renter returns the fruit, now wrapped carefully in a silk cloth. It will rest until next time. Maybe tomorrow, maybe next season, maybe after a little polishing, and some discreet rotating. There's something oddly relaxing about the cycle. The pineapple as a travelling performer, visiting drawing rooms, stealing hearts, leaving no crumbs. And you wonder, what would it feel like to hold one? Not just touch it, but own it, however briefly. Would it feel warm from the journey? Would it smell of sea salt and damp straw? Would you be tempted to taste it just once? You suspect that many renters did sneak a bite. A thin sliver carved carefully from the bottom. A taste stolen in the privacy of a pantry. Just enough to say, I know what it's like. Then turned it, concealed the gap, and carried on the illusion. Pineapple rentals weren't just economic. They were emotional. They offered access, however fleeting, to a kind of imagined luxury. A story you could tell. A version of yourself you could temporarily perform. It's evening now. Gas lamps flicker along the alley, casting a soft glow on the shop sign. The pineapple rests behind the window, catching the light just so. You swear it looks smug. And maybe it should, because it knows it'll be the star of someone else's story tomorrow. You slip into your coat, it's damp again, always is, and follow the glow of gas lamps to the edge of town, where the air turns colder and the buildings farther apart. Here, behind ivy-covered walls and ornate iron gates, something strange and steamy rises from the gardens. A pinery. Yes, that's the word they used. Not greenhouse, not hothouse. A pinery, an entire glass structure dedicated solely to the cultivation of pineapples in the most pineapple-inappropriate climate imaginable. You approach the building, and immediately your breath fogs the glass. Inside, it's like stepping into a tropical world. The air is thick, heavy, sweet. Rows of pineapple plants stretch out in every direction, their spiky tops poking at the edges of the low, arched ceiling. You blink through the steam and feel the heat rising from underground furnaces that have been burning since before dawn. This isn't gardening, it's obsession. You hear a low, satisfied chuckle from the head gardener, a wiry man with sooty sleeves and sootier fingernails. "That one there," he says proudly, gesturing to a pineapple barely larger than your fist, "took 5 years." He says it like you might say, "I just finished building a cathedral." And in a way, he has. These pineapples weren't grown for food. They were experiments in horticultural dominance, a game of can we rather than should we. And each successful fruit was a middle-class miracle, a homegrown alternative to shipping the things halfway across the empire. The early attempts were laughable, cold, mouldy, the stuff of journal footnotes and failed betrothals. But over time, the British refined their method. Historians still debate whether the technology of pinery construction influenced later greenhouse architecture. Some claim it's where modern climate-controlled farming began. Others point out that most of it was just burning tons of coal to coax a stubborn fruit into ripening 6 years late. They're probably both right. You crouch beside a plant and notice the elaborate trench system running along the floor. These flues channel heat from a hidden furnace, distributing it carefully. Warmth for the roots, steam for the air. Above, the glass panes are angled to catch the maximum amount of rare English sunlight, which mostly means light greyness. And this heat, this effort, it's not for tomatoes or cucumbers. It's all for a single fruit that might, just might, survive long enough to sit on someone's sideboard for a week before collapsing into a sugary puddle. You lean on a nearby barrel and realise it's full of horse dung. Ah, yes, another crucial ingredient. Pineapples like warmth, and nothing says British ingenuity like repurposing manure for imperial horticulture. It's not glamorous, but it works. One fringe detail: some wealthier estates would host pineapple tours, inviting guests to walk through their pineries and marvel at the progress of each fruit. "That one's 3 years old," someone might say proudly. "We've named it Augustus." You try not to laugh. You're shown a leather-bound logbook filled with plant notes. Specimen 7, unresponsive, mild rot, possible emotional withdrawal. You wonder if the gardener might be projecting. One particularly zealous gentleman, Sir Henry Rotham, famously built a 3-tiered pinery complex with heated walls and retractable roof panels. He grew 5 pineapples over a decade. Only one was edible. He cried when he cut it. So did his chef. So did, reportedly, his wife, though that might have been about something else. You wander deeper into the greenhouse, the glass walls fogging more as the night cools outside. You spot a bench where someone's left a half-finished sketch of a pineapple in pencil, complete with notes on shading. Someone's penciled in little eyelashes. You smile. These fruits weren't just plants, they were projects, investments, aspirations, like growing your own diamond or trying to raise a cat that comes when called. There's something endearing in the madness, because all this effort, the soot, the dung, the glass polishing, was about creating something ephemeral, something you couldn't mass produce, something that would never really pay for itself. And they did it anyway. At one estate, you're told, they even hired a violinist to play softly while the pineapples were checked each morning. Not for the guests, for the fruit. Whether or not the pineapples appreciated Vivaldi remains one of horticulture's great unanswered questions. The gardener leads you to a far corner where a single, perfectly golden pineapple is basking under a custom-fitted skylight. "She's almost ready," he says in a reverent whisper. "Just another month or two." You nod solemnly. It feels right. You step back outside into the cool night air. Your skin tingles from the shift in temperature. Somewhere nearby, a chimney puffs smoke from the furnace below. The pinery hums behind you, alive and oddly proud. And you think, for a fruit so tied to luxury, the real story might be in these quiet, steamy rooms, where someone in soot-streaked sleeves whispered encouragement to a stubborn plant for 6 long winters. You head down the gravel path, past hedges shaped like pyramids, and marble fountains shaped like swans, and glance back once more. It glows faintly in the moonlight, a little glass temple, built for one small, spiky miracle. Morning mist curls along the gravel as you make your way to another corner of the estate, one where the smell of oil paint and turpentine fills the air. You're entering a different kind of gallery now, not one filled with noble busts or allegorical nymphs, but with portraits of people trying very hard not to look like they're showing off a pineapple. But they are. And it's hilarious. The first painting you see features a man in a crimson waistcoat, standing beside a pedestal that looks suspiciously too tall to be practical. Atop it, naturally, is a pineapple. Not sliced, not served, just posing, regal as ever. The man, likely a minor baronet, gazes proudly at the viewer, one hand resting gently, possessively on the pineapple like it's a beloved lapdog. You stifle a giggle. It's hard to tell where the ego ends and the fruit begins. You move along the wall, where more paintings hang in heavy gilt frames. A woman in pearls poses beside a garden urn that just happens to contain a pineapple. Another holds one delicately in her gloved hand, as if presenting it to the gods. A young boy, maybe 8 years old, stands stiffly beside a bowl of fruit in which the pineapple clearly doesn't belong. Too large, too shiny, and painted with more detail than the boy himself. Historians still debate how many of these pineapples were real, and how many were artistic embellishments. Some argue that painters added them to elevate the subject's status, a little fruity flex for posterity. Others believe the patrons insisted on it. Yes, the curls are nice, but make sure the pineapple gleams. In one particularly lavish portrait, a military officer with a suspiciously clean uniform gazes nobly into the distance, while a servant behind him, practically out of frame, balances a pineapple on a silver tray. Subtle? Not at all. But then, that was the point. You step closer to a canvas dated 1744. It shows an entire family. Parents, 3 children, 2 dogs, and a maid, gathered around a dinner table with, of course, a pineapple as centerpiece. It glows like the Holy Grail. The father's hand rests beside it, pinky slightly raised. The mother beams. The kids look vaguely afraid of it. You imagine the scene during the sitting. Children, smile. Look grateful. The pineapple's rented by the hour. Back then, portraiture wasn't just documentation, it was aspiration. These paintings were the 18th century equivalent of Instagram posts, tag number, blessed and number organic. A painted pineapple said, "We are worldly. We are refined. We know someone who knows someone in Jamaica." One fringe anecdote claims that a merchant once had himself painted with a pineapple he borrowed for the portrait session, then returned immediately afterward. Years later, when questioned about it, he simply said, "It was spiritually mine." You enter a side chamber where the portraits shift from oil to miniature, those tiny painted ovals worn as brooches or tucked into keepsake boxes. And yes, some of these feature pineapples too. A noblewoman's eye, a lock of hair, and a sliver of pineapple delicately painted in the background. Romantic? Perhaps. Over the top? Absolutely. There's even a still life in the Dutch style, bountiful grapes, curling vines, a half-peeled lemon, and a pineapple that practically takes up a third of the canvas. It gleams with that waxy, almost too perfect shine, like the artist spent days just on the texture. More pineapple than painting. You step away and take in the room. Dozens of pineapples, all static, all unspoiled, all eternal, and none of them ever eaten. There's something oddly comforting in it. These people, so obsessed with status and spectacle, wanted desperately to be remembered, and so they clutched their golden fruit like talismans of elegance, signs that they had arrived, that they mattered. You sit for a moment on a velvet bench and look at your reflection in the glass of a nearby frame. You think about what today's version might be. Maybe a car in the background of a graduation photo, a blurry Eiffel Tower on a dating profile, a latte with art so intricate you're afraid to drink it. It's all the same. The pineapple was never about the fruit. It was about the feeling it gave people, that for one moment they were part of something rare, desirable, and golden. You rise and walk slowly through the gallery one last time. Each face looks slightly ridiculous, but also deeply human, hopeful, longing to be admired. And every pineapple, silent, perfect, immortalized in oil, long after it would have gone soft on the sideboard. Your next stop is not a gallery or garden, but a boutique perfumery nestled between a wig shop and a silversmith, where the windows glisten with tiny glass bottles and gold foil labels. You step inside and are immediately wrapped in a cloud of something sweet, floral, and just the slightest bit acidic. And yes, there it is again, that faint, tropical note. Pineapple. The shopkeeper, a dapper man with absurdly curled moustaches and a voice like velvet, greets you with a bow. You're here for the essence of luxury, I presume. He gestures toward a gilded case where a row of glass vials rest on silk. Each bears the same label, Ananas elegans. That's French for pineapple, of course, because in 18th century England, if something had French branding, it had to be fancy. You uncork one of the bottles and breathe in. The scent is confusing. Equal parts ripe orchard and lemon-soaked floor polish. Still, there's a richness to it, a suggestion of heat and sweetness. You're told it was distilled from imported oils and blended with citrus, rosewater and ambergris. Not a drop of actual pineapple in sight, but no one's checking. You learn that pineapple scents were incredibly fashionable in elite circles, not because people were clamouring to smell like produce, but because it evoked something distant, something expensive. Wearing pineapple perfume said, I have access to lands beyond your wildest imagination, and I'm not afraid to spritz it on my neck. Historians still debate whether the average 18th century Englishman even knew what a pineapple tasted like. But the scent, that was replicable, and therefore rentable. From candles to cosmetics, pineapple became a sort of aromatic shorthand for colonial luxury. Why bother with the messy, perishable reality when you could just bottle the idea? You examine a powder compact embossed with a tiny pineapple motif. The rouge inside is a garish coral. The scent, a whisper of something sugary clinging to the puff. Someone once dabbed this onto their cheeks before entering a ballroom, fully convinced it made them smell exotic. One fringe advertisement you discover boasts of pineapple-scented pomade for wigs, which raises several questions, including whether any of those wigs also attracted fruit flies. You imagine the pre-party rituals, a bath scented with pineapple oil, followed by a dusting of pineapple-infused powder, topped off with a delicate application of pineapple balm behind the ears. Did they smell like a fruit basket? Possibly. Did they feel superior for it? Almost certainly. Even handkerchiefs you find were sometimes dabbed with pineapple essence, so when a gentleman sneezed into lace, it released the faint aroma of the tropics. You can't decide if that's charming or faintly tragic. Maybe both. You walk now into a small side room where experimental concoctions are brewing. A woman in wire-rimmed spectacles swirls a beaker and mutters, "Too citrusy." She offers you a whiff of a new blend called Tropical Reverie. It smells like pineapples if they'd been raised by bergamot and muskmelon. You nod politely. One quirk of the time. because very few people had smelled a real pineapple, the scent industry had enormous freedom to improvise. You could slap the word pineapple on nearly anything vaguely fruity, and no one would call your bluff. Which is probably how pineapple bath salts ended up smelling like candied violets. You remember a story you heard earlier of a merchant's wife who kept a bowl of pineapple-scented potpourri in her foyer. Guests would inhale theatrically upon entering. "Is that ananas?" they'd whisper, half in awe, half in confusion. It was dried orange peel and soap shavings. She smiled and said nothing. You sit for a moment beside a low table displaying pineapple-shaped perfume bottles. Some delicate as hummingbird eggs, others large enough to double as bludgeons. One is made entirely of green-tinted glass. Another has a gold stopper shaped like leaves. The attention to detail is absurd, and yet there's something soothing about the repetition. Pineapple, pineapple, pineapple. You read a small sign on the wall. The scent of elsewhere. That's what the pineapple was. A fragrant stand-in for a life richer, warmer, more gilded than the one you were born into. And you wonder, what scents would define luxury now? Oud. Vanilla. The smell of new electronics. We still reach for status through smell. It's just less sticky now. As you leave the perfumery, the air outside smells suddenly plain. Just rain and coal smoke. You almost miss the faint, ridiculous sweetness of that tropical haze. You walk down the cobblestones with a little bottle in your pocket, the scent lingering on your sleeve. Not overpowering, just enough to suggest you've been somewhere improbable. And behind you, the pineapple waits on its shelf, bottled and distilled, the idea of paradise in one neat glass vial. Tonight you're chasing shadows, not the glimmer of chandeliers or the glow of greenhouse furnaces, but the quiet, twitchy kind that creep along alley walls after dark. Because when a pineapple is worth as much as a horse or a month's wages or a room full of lace gloves, it's only a matter of time before someone tries to steal it. You're in London again, but off the well-waxed floors and away from polite company. These streets smell of ash, ale, and damp wool. Somewhere nearby, a watchman snores gently against a post, and just ahead, beneath the flicker of a failing lantern, you see him, a servant, no more than 16, clutching something under his coat. Spiky, suspiciously golden. You follow. He darts into a side door behind a tavern and emerges empty-handed. A few minutes later, you hear a bark of laughter from within, then clapping, then a booming voice. A toast to her spikiness. Pineapple theft complete. It happened more often than you'd think, because while aristocrats were busy admiring their fruit, their staff was busy calculating risk. Historians still argue whether these thefts were common or just exaggerated in gossip columns, but several court records remain. Pineapples reported stolen. Servants dismissed. One footman jailed for tampering with tropical fruit property. That's an actual phrase. The logistics were always tricky. Pineapples were rarely left unattended. Some were locked in cabinets between viewings. Others had rotating display times with a servant stationed beside them like a royal guard. One particularly paranoid host even chained the fruit to the table leg with a fine silver chain. Respectable? Not remotely. Effective? Apparently, yes. You sit beside a chimney stack on a rooftop and listen to the street below. A whisper reaches your ear. Got it from Mr. Fenwick's. Still warm from the conservatory. They're not talking about fresh bread. They're talking about a hot pineapple. A fringe detail emerges from old pamphlets. A sort of pineapple black market once operated behind some London taverns. Fruits too bruised for polite society, or nearing the end of their visual appeal, would be sold off discreetly to lesser families or theatrical troupes in need of props. One buyer reportedly bought 5 in a row and threw pineapple parties until the stench became unbearable. Then there were the copycats. Some desperate hosts, unable to procure or rent the real thing, resorted to deception. You remember the story of the Westwell family, who proudly displayed what guests assumed was a Caribbean import. until it was discovered to be carved from dyed turnips and waxed with goose fat for shine. The scandal was swift. Lady Westwell claimed artistic reinterpretation. No one invited her back. You move through a cramped tenement kitchen where a cook dabs pineapple scent behind her ears, then pulls a mould from a cupboard. It's a sugar sculpture, shaped exactly like the real thing. She paints it with a mixture of egg yolk and saffron to achieve that perfect golden hue. It's going on display tonight. Only the servants will know. Only the servants ever know. Even when pineapples weren't stolen, they were often borrowed, temporarily removed from one estate and displayed at another with the help of a sympathetic footman. Cross-county pineapple trafficking. By the time the fruit returned, it had more travel experience than most citizens. You read a diary entry from a valet who confesses to sneaking a taste while polishing one. Just the bottom, he writes. So soft. Nearly wept. He was promptly fired. The pineapple was reportedly visibly diminished. One might ask, why so serious? But to the elite, these fruits weren't just expensive, they were symbolic. Having one stolen was a loss of face, a breach of narrative, like losing a priceless family jewel, if that jewel ripened too fast and smelled vaguely of vinegar. You lean against the back wall of a pastry shop now, where the baker is telling a customer, sotto voce, that his display features genuine and imported fruit. It doesn't. But he smiles as he wraps her marzipan tart, topped with a little sculpted pineapple wedge. Illusion, sold by the slice. There's something funny and a little sad about all this secrecy, all this danger over a fruit. But in a way, it's what made the pineapple valuable. Not just its taste or rarity, but its vulnerability. It could be bruised, stolen, spoiled. It needed guarding, and in that need, people found purpose. You walk back toward the market just as dawn begins to stretch across the cobbles. The same servant boy from earlier is watching his breath puff into the morning air, a coin in his hand, a tired smile on his face. He nods at you. No words, just the shared understanding that for some the fruit wasn't luxury, it was opportunity, and somewhere, probably right now, a guest is peering into an empty fruit pedestal, pretending not to notice. The morning fog clears as you leave the winding alleys and slip through a wrought-iron gate into the perfectly symmetrical grounds of a country estate. It's the sort of place where the hedges are trimmed into elaborate spirals and the gravel crunches politely underfoot. You're not here for a fruit tonight, but for the buildings. Specifically a building shaped like a pineapple. Yes, you read that right. Rising from the garden like some regal, spiky crown is a domed structure covered in stone leaves, carved with uncanny precision. It's absurd, majestic, a little ridiculous, and entirely real. Welcome to the Dunmore Pineapple. You stroll toward it, half expecting someone in powdered wigs to step out with a monocle and say, "May I offer you some candied mango?" But no one does. Just you, the breeze, and this architectural fruit. Historians agree it was built around 1761 by John Murray, the 4th Earl of Dunmore, who, having served as governor in Virginia, apparently returned to Scotland with a passion for pineapples and zero sense of restraint. The building served as a garden retreat, possibly a hothouse at one point, and definitely as a statement. You don't commission a pineapple cupola unless you're saying, "I am rich, bored, and I will decorate my roof with fruit, thank you." You step inside. The interior is plain compared to the outside, arched stone ceilings, cool flagstone floors. But it's quiet, peaceful, and the light filters in through tiny windows carved into the stony rind. Historians still debate why the pineapple became such a common motif in British architecture. Some argue it symbolized hospitality, echoing Caribbean traditions where the fruit was a sign of welcome. Others think it was just fashion taken to absurd heights, a sort of edible baroque flourish. The truth, as always, probably lies somewhere in the middle. What's certain is this: Once pineapples were seen as luxury, they began appearing everywhere, not just on plates or in paintings, but on rooftops, balustrades, and iron gates. You pass another estate, this one with pineapple finials topping the garden walls. A third has them flanking the entrance to a mausoleum. Nothing says eternal rest like tropical fruit. At one point, you walk beneath an archway with pineapples carved at each side, so delicately rendered that you swear you can see the subtle dimples in the rind. The stonemason must have studied a real one, or at least a good sketch. There's a fringe tale of an ambitious architect who proposed an entire pineapple-shaped estate. Dining rooms in the rind, bedrooms tucked under the leafy crown. Sadly, or perhaps wisely, the client declined. You settle for now at the base of the Dunmore pineapple, resting against its curving foundation. A squirrel darts by, pauses, and then disappears into the underbrush like it's seen this too many times. You take in the building again. It's beautiful and ridiculous and oddly comforting, because it reminds you how far people will go to capture a feeling. This wasn't just a wealthy man flexing his resources. This was someone playing, indulging in whimsy, turning a fruit into architecture, turning a symbol into shelter. You walk through another estate's garden and find a gazebo with pineapple accents, its spindly posts curling into leafy spirals. In a nearby town, a pub boasts pineapple shutters. Even a local church has a fruit subtly carved into the wooden pulpit. Someone had to sneak that in. You think about what symbols we carve into our buildings today. Stars, logos, suns, eagles, but few are so humble or so spiny. You pass through a village market where a wrought iron sign above a bakery shows a golden pineapple dangling from a scroll. The sign creaks in the wind. Below, a chalkboard reads, "Try our pineapple tarts." You suspect there's no pineapple in them, but the hope is there, because that's what the pineapple came to represent. Not just wealth or taste, but promise. The promise of something lush and sweet and entirely other. It's a fruit that doesn't belong in these foggy fields and grey skies, and that's exactly the point. You look back at the Dunmore pineapple one last time, its stony leaves catching the early light. It's beautiful, impractical, enduring, and it still stands. Long after the parties have ended, the greenhouse is cooled and the last real fruit rotted into sweet, forgotten syrup. You're back indoors now, seated at a dining table set for 12, though only one seat is occupied, yours. The silverware gleams. The porcelain is patterned with delicate blue vines and tiny pineapples, of course. Candles flicker in the sconces, and in front of you, resting innocently on a porcelain plate, is a pineapple. Not whole, sliced. Thin, glistening wedges curl like golden fans. The smell is intoxicating, ripe, tangy, with a hint of syrup. And the moment you lift your fork, you understand something people in the 1700s knew all too well. A pineapple might look beautiful, but eating it is another story entirely. You take a bite. It's exquisite for half a second. Then the acid punches you. Your tongue tingles, your gums retreat. Your teeth whisper, "What have you done?" You take another bite. Stubborn. Same result. You wince, reaching for your water. And suddenly you understand the tales. Historians still argue whether the pineapples of the 18th century were truly more acidic than today's carefully cultivated ones. But one thing's for sure. Back then, they were unpredictable. Rushed to ripen, bruised in transit, picked too soon or too late. The result? Fruit that looked like heaven and chewed like vengeance. One poor duke, it's said, suffered a mouth inflammation most severe after consuming a full pineapple at a banquet. Another claimed it stripped the varnish off my soul. Poetic. Possibly accurate. The pineapple was tricky. If it was overripe, it fermented quickly and tasted like fruity vinegar. If underripe, it fought your palate with toothpick-grade fibres and acidic backlash, and still people insisted on eating it. You rise from the table and step into a kitchen where a chef in a tall, flour-dusted hat is muttering under his breath. Before him, a pineapple dissected like an archaeological artifact. He's poking it with a long fork. He sighs. "Rotten at the base again," he says. "The crown's a liar." You nod solemnly. The crown is a liar. Despite the risks, pineapple dishes became all the rage. Cookbooks from the era featured pineapple compotes, pineapple jellies, and even pineapple pickles. Imagine sour sweet wedges soaked in vinegar and spice, served beside mutton. You're not sure if that's culinary innovation or a dare. One fringe recipe you find calls for pineapple snow, grated fruit folded into whipped cream and egg whites, served in chilled porcelain bowls shaped like pineapples. Very meta, very dangerous, possibly illegal today. You peek into the larder, where slices of pineapple are arranged on pewter trays beside a bowl of lemons and a jug of clotted cream. The cook tells you confidentially that sometimes they soak the slices in sugar water overnight to calm them down. You grin at the image of an angry pineapple slice, pacing the plate. Of course the brave still went raw. Eating fresh pineapple in front of others was a flex. It said, "I am rich enough to ruin my mouth for 3 days and still smile through it." Some guests took tiny bites and pretended to enjoy it. Others tried not to cry. There was also the issue of digestion. Pineapples didn't sit well, especially after a 10-course meal involving jellied eels, beef tongue, and 3 types of trifle. One diary entry from 1763 reads simply, "Pineapple, regret, bed. You wander now through a sunroom where a lady in green silk is spooning pineapple jam onto toast. She offers you some. You politely decline. She shrugs. 'It's better on biscuits,' she says, and then mutters, 'if it doesn't curdle the cream again.' You ask her if she actually likes pineapple. She considers. 'I like what it means,' she says. 'I like being the kind of woman who serves it.' That says it all, really. You end up back at your table. The slices are still there, glistening. You take one last bite, it burns, you smile. Because now you understand the final layer of the pineapple story. It was never easy. It was never convenient. And it was rarely kind. But people wanted it anyway. Desperately. Because for a few brief, juicy seconds it made them feel like they'd tasted something rare. Something special. Something that said they belonged to a world bigger, sweeter, and more golden than their own, even if it hurt a little. You're in a grand dining hall now, but something's off. The candelabras are the same. The tapestries hang as always. But at the centre of the long oak table sits a pineapple that isn't a pineapple at all. You blink. Look closer. Tap it lightly with your fingernail. Hollow. It's made of sugar. The deception is good. Very good. The leaves are pulled sugar-tinted with green spinach dye. The body is moulded marzipan, airbrushed in shades of ochre and caramel to mimic ripening skin. And the scent, a gentle honeyed perfume piped in from a hidden sachet. Welcome to the world of faux fruit. Because in a society where real pineapples were rare, expensive, and deeply perishable, the smartest host did what every good illusionist does. They faked it. You stroll along a display table where other replicas sit proudly. Pineapples made of wax, wood, porcelain, sugar, and even painted paper mache. Some are decorative, others edible. None are meant to trick exactly, but rather to stand in for the real thing. Historians still debate how much of this fakery was knowingly acknowledged. Some records suggest hosts openly announce their sugar fruits, calling them models or sculptures. Others, perhaps more ambitious or insecure, let the illusion stand, basking in admiration that no one dared question. One fringe tale tells of a minor viscount who displayed a wooden pineapple for 5 years running, insisting it was an heirloom from the Caribbean. He even gave it a name, Ambrosia. Guests curtsied to it. No one ever called him out. You pass into a confectioner's workshop, where a man in a flour-dusted waistcoat leans over a half-carved pineapple mould. He's muttering about the ridges being too honest. His apprentice brings over a tray of candied pineapple rings, made entirely of spiced sugar paste. You try one. It's sweet, gritty, and vaguely citrusy. Convincing? Not really. Satisfying? Absolutely. Back in the banquet hall, you sit beside a sugar pineapple the size of a melon. It's been lacquered with egg white for sheen and topped with real leaves salvaged from a spoiled fruit. The effect is unsettling, like a hybrid creature. Half fantasy, half compost bin. You smile anyway, because the effort matters, even if it melts. Not everyone could afford a real pineapple, not even to rent, but many could afford the illusion of one. The sugar arts of the 18th century were incredible. Artists crafted entire tableaus, fruit baskets, pyramids, cornucopias, all from sugar and flour and powdered imagination. You read of one woman who commissioned an entire pineapple orchard in miniature, served on a mirrored tray. Each fruit was bite-sized. Guests were invited to pluck one and watch it crumble in their fingers. And there's something strangely democratic about that. Sugar pineapples were still expensive, but they could be made, remade, shared, tasted. Unlike the real thing, they didn't rot. They didn't offend the tongue, and no one went home with ulcers. You peek into a display cabinet where a set of porcelain pineapples sits under glass. Their lids lift off to reveal jam, butter, or sometimes pickled quail eggs. Not ideal, you note. These weren't just novelties. They were a way of participating in the pineapple craze without risking spoilage or scandal. Of course, fakery had limits. One diary entry describes a guest biting into what he assumed was a real slice of pineapple, only to discover it was wax. He broke a tooth, left the party early. The host claimed ignorance. The wax sculptor, meanwhile, was delighted. In some circles, faux pineapples became collectibles, passed from hostess to hostess. Some had drawers, others music boxes. One even had a hidden flask inside, making it perhaps the most useful pineapple in the room. You reflect now on how much of culture is performative. The pineapple, whether real or fake, was always about perception. If it looked the part, it was the part. Or close enough. The audience clapped either way. The line between admiration and delusion blurred quickly. But isn't that always the case with symbols? You walk through one last parlour where a wax pineapple has collapsed in the heat. Its skin is melting slightly. The leaves have drooped, but it still sits on the tray defiantly. The illusion continues, just a little warped, and as you step into the cool hallway you think, perhaps that was the point all along, not to taste the pineapple, but to believe you could. The breeze has shifted now. You feel it before you see it, a crispness in the air, a change in tone. It's not just the weather, it's the vibe. Something's over. Something's changed. You step into a drawing room that seems like it's waiting for guests who'll never arrive. The pineapple on the sideboard is a little too brown around the edges. The silver tray is dull. The servants seem tired, distracted, and when you ask if tonight's fruit will be served, the butler just shrugs. Welcome to the beginning of the end. Because like all trends, the pineapple's reign couldn't last forever. You sit on a faded velvet chair and glance at a crumpled pamphlet on the table. The new citrus. Why oranges are the fruit of the future. It's not satire, it's earnest. And the pineapple, it's yesterday's obsession. Historians still argue whether the decline was due to changing trade routes, the rise of citrus imports, or simply exhaustion. But around the early 1800s, the pineapple stopped being a marvel and started being a bit of a chore. You overhear someone in the next room say, "We served pineapple at the Turners last week. Again." Honestly, I prefer a proper apple. It's the aristocratic equivalent of saying, "Ugh, another avocado toast." Oranges, on the other hand, portable, sweet, affordable, and crucially, predictable. They didn't need a flue-heated greenhouse or 4 years of whispered encouragement. They just grew, and people could eat them without weeping. You walk now through a modest townhouse where a family of merchants has gathered. The pineapple they've placed on the sideboard is clearly wax. No one mentions it. A child pokes it absently. No one stops him. On the dining table, a bowl of plump, cheerful oranges. Someone peels one. The zest sprays gently into the air, and suddenly the room feels alive. Pineapples may have smelled like empire, but oranges smell like comfort. Tangy, inviting. Not a flex, just a pleasure. The shift is subtle, but irreversible. Even the art reflects it. You find a newer portrait on the wall, early Victorian, stiffly posed. The subject holds a book, not a fruit. The centerpiece in the painting is a vase of flowers, not a pineapple. No one's trying too hard. There's something refreshing about that. Less spectacle, more sincerity. You pass by a kitchen where a cook is preparing a marmalade. She stirs slowly, humming. "We used to do pineapple jelly," she says, not looking up. "Took 3 days and 3 strong men to cut the thing. This ? This is better." She tastes a spoonful and smiles. And in the conservatory, you find a gardener pulling down glass panes. "The furnace is out," he says. "No more pineapples this year." He doesn't sound sad. He sounds relieved. He points to a small citrus tree by the window. Much easier. Happier plants, happier gardener. You nod, and he laughs. "I still dream about those pinery fires, though." The soot, the stress, all for a fruit no one even liked eating. There are still a few stubborn loyalists, of course. You pass a parlour where an ageing noblewoman fans herself beside a slightly desiccated pineapple. "They're not out of fashion," she says firmly. "They're exclusive now." Her dog sneezes in agreement. But you know the truth. Even the dog knows. A fringe note in a diary reveals a shift in etiquette. "Pineapples now considered gauche if presented more than once a season," one hostess wrote. "Guests prefer freshness. Oranges more cheerful, less colonial overhang." That last phrase sticks with you, because under all the pomp and pastry, the pineapple was always tied to empire, to conquest, to plantations, to wealth extracted far from home. Tastes were changing, and with them, values. Slowly, quietly, the fruit's shine dulled. You pass a shop where the display window once held a proudly posed pineapple. It now features lemon curd. The sign has changed too. Taste the sunshine. No mention of pineries. No maritime metaphors. Even in architecture you notice fewer fruit finials. More ivy, more restraint. You smile. It's evolution. Pineapples didn't disappear. They just stopped being performance pieces. Now, as the light fades and the street lamps flicker on, you walk through a garden that used to host pineapple parties. It's overgrown, quiet. A bench still bears the faint imprint of a carved fruit. You trace it gently with your finger. The pineapple didn't fail. It simply fulfilled its role and moved aside. You peel an orange as you sit, juice catching on your fingertips. You bite, and the flavour wakes your mouth in the kindest way. No burns, no regrets. Just sweetness. Sometimes you think letting go of the spectacle makes room for real joy. You're walking now along a dusty museum corridor, its wooden floors sighing under your steps. Display cases line the walls, each filled with artifacts from Britain's imperial heyday. Ivory fans, lacquer boxes, porcelain tea sets, and pineapples. Not real ones, of course, but painted, sculpted, carved and immortalized in every material but fruit. You stop before one labelled "Colonial Symbols of Hospitality." Inside is a carved mahogany chair, the back crowned with a delicately rendered pineapple finial. The plaque reads, "Commissioned in Calcutta, 1817. Hospitality." That was the line. That's what the pineapple had become, a symbol of welcome. It's a little ironic, considering how many unwelcoming things the empire brought along with it. Historians still debate the pineapple's function in British colonies. Was it truly a native welcome symbol adopted by the British? Or something co-opted and twisted into a tool of soft power? The answer, as always, is layered and sticky. You move on to a display of colonial home goods, candle holders, tapestries, fireplace screens, all embossed with pineapples. One tea set even has a pineapple-shaped sugar pot. The fruit that was once rare and feral now mass-produced in Staffordshire ceramics. And it's not just in India or the Caribbean. You see pineapple motifs in documents from Sierra Leone, Ghana, parts of Australia, even Canadian frontiers. It was a stamp of familiarity, a not-so-subtle reminder of the Crown's reach. You stop at a portrait of a British governor, seated stiffly in tropical whites. Behind him, not the Union Jack, but a wall adorned with pineapple stencils. It's not that he liked the fruit. It's that he needed to be seen surrounded by it. You walk into a recreated colonial dining room. High ceilings, heavy drapes, polished wood. A single centerpiece dominates the table, a wooden pineapple carved and varnished to a glossy sheen. The guide whispers, "Never removed." It was meant to remind guests that they were part of something larger. You nod. It did that, and more. In Jamaica, you learn some enslaved workers began carving pineapples into their walking sticks, stylized, almost sarcastic, mocking the same symbols that adorn the plantation owner's china. Resistance can be subtle. In Hawaii, the pineapple took a new path entirely. By the late 19th century, companies like Dole transformed it into a major industry, profitable, commercial, industrialized. No longer a royal indulgence, but a commodity. Canned, stamped, shipped, and still the symbolism lingered. You flip through a colonial ledger and see pineapples stamped beside shipping routes, inked on menus, embroidered into uniforms. It became a corporate mascot for empire, sweet, tropical, vaguely exotic, and stripped of its more difficult roots. One fringe document describes a pineapple reception hosted in Lagos in 1904, where British officials served pineapple punch and gifted pineapple-shaped brooches to local leaders. The event was considered gracious. The punch was reportedly terrible. You pass a wall of old propaganda posters now, bright colours, smiling white families, slogans like "Pineapples, a taste of the tropics," a fruit once rare enough to rent, now sold in tins at 5 for a shilling. Something about that transition stays with you. The shift from reverence to routine, from miracle to marketing. You pause by a globe marked with little golden pineapples. Each symbol denotes a location where pineapples were planted under British rule. Often experimentally, sometimes disastrously. Many never took root. But the effort speaks volumes. They weren't just growing fruit, they were planting symbols. You think about all the places the pineapple travelled, both physically and metaphorically, from South American jungle floors to Caribbean plantations, across oceans, through frost-bitten greenhouses, onto silver platters, into sugar molds, then across colonies and into modern branding. You step into a final gallery room. Here, under soft light, sits a single desiccated pineapple, preserved in wax, faded to a pale gold. The sign reads simply, "Presented to Queen Charlotte, 1787. Grown in Surrey. The fruit is tiny, bruised-looking with a wilted crown. And yet, it holds your gaze. Because behind the dried skin and brittle leaves is a story of hunger and ambition, absurdity and art, hospitality and hegemony. You stand for a moment longer, the hum of the lights buzzing faintly. Around you, pineapple-shaped shadows stretch across the floor. The fruit is gone, but the meaning remains. It's late now. You've walked the markets, dined beside powdered nobility, peeked inside greenhouses and galleries, sniffed perfumed pomanders, and stood under roofs shaped like fruit. But tonight, your journey ends where the pineapple still quietly lives, not in high society or colonial halls, but in something far more ordinary. Your kitchen. You step inside, guided by moonlight filtering through the window. The hum of the refrigerator is the only sound. You flick on a dim overhead light, and there it is, bright and cheerful, beaming from a tea towel. A pineapple, printed in yellow ink, its green crown curling with mid-century optimism. You smile, because suddenly all that absurdity, the silk-draped pedestals, the rented fruit, the sugar replicas, has circled back into something familiar, something homey. You open a cabinet. A mug with a tiny pineapple on the handle, a bowl patterned with pineapples and palm fronds, a magnet on the fridge shaped like a pineapple wearing sunglasses. The fruit that once stood for empire, for exclusivity and grandeur, now welcomes you home with a wink. Historians still argue whether this modern friendliness was intentional. Did the pineapple's imperial overtones slowly get replaced by suburban kitsch on purpose? Or did it just happen, like a word repeated until it loses its edge and becomes soft? One thing's certain, the pineapple never disappeared. It simply adapted. In hotels across the world, you've seen it carved into banisters, printed on napkins, even embossed onto do not disturb signs. It stands for hospitality now, not the kind that parades on a velvet cushion, but the warm, simple kind. The real kind. A smile at the door, a picture of something cold, a soft place to land. You run your fingers over the edge of a ceramic pineapple dish, a wedding gift maybe, or picked up at a thrift shop for a few dollars. You don't remember, but it feels right here, comforting, familiar. You brew some tea, let it steep. Then settle on the couch, a blanket over your knees, the distant memory of everything you've just walked through curling softly around your mind. All the ambition, the wealth, the struggle, the illusion. And now, just peace. You recall the gardener's words, the one who whispered to his fruit, soot-streaked and proud, or the footman who stole a slice in the dark and called it divine, or the woman who wore the scent just to feel more powerful. Everyone had a reason, and everyone, in some small way, believed in the pineapple's promise that something sweet, beautiful, and rare could show up in their lives, even if it arrived late, spoiled, or carved out of wax. You sip your tea. It's chamomile, not pineapple, but that's okay. And in the stillness of your living room, as the shadows stretch and the lights dim, you look again at that tea towel, smiling back at you, cheerful, constant, a little crown of welcome, right in your own home. The light in the room grows softer now. Your breathing slows with it, each inhale easier, each exhale longer. Let it all settle, everything you've wandered through tonight. Let the images fold into one another. The flicker of candlelight on golden skin, the hush of a dining room when the fruit is unveiled, the quiet hiss of steam rising from a tropical pinery in the frost-bitten dawn. You've walked centuries, crossed oceans, peeked behind curtains and cabinets, and through it all a single fruit led you, stranger than fiction, sweeter than its reputation. Let those thoughts drift now. Let the edges blur. You don't need to remember every powdered wig or every spoonful of jam. Just let the feeling stay. That odd little warmth that comes from watching human beings love something. Sincerely, obsessively, often ridiculously. We are, all of us, meaning makers. We put hope in symbols. We borrow light from exotic places. We decorate, dramatize, and daydream. And sometimes we do it with fruit. So wherever you are tonight, beneath heavy blankets, on the edge of sleep, or just nestled quietly inside your own thoughts, know this. The world is full of stories as strange, beautiful, and funny as the tale of the pineapple. And sometimes the most comforting thing isn't a conclusion. It's knowing that the sweetness still lingers. That even now, tucked into kitchens and scattered across memory, it stays, like a whisper of hospitality, a quiet crown on your counter, software familiar, and ready to welcome you again tomorrow. Sleep well.